So you own a rental property that you're collecting rent on a monthly basis. You also own a vacation property in Hawaii where it's not rented out, it's a holding property. You have your own vehicle where you're driving on a day-to-day basis. You also have an ETF portfolio where it's generating regular monthly dividends. By definition, they're all considered assets. Are they all the same? From an investment perspective, some of them is probably better than the other. Let's talk more. Before we dive into the deep end, I think it's important for us to define what asset is as a baseline. Asset is defined as anything that has tangible or intangible values. By means of intangible, we mean that it could be a patent over a particular technology you have developed if you're an inventor, or a intellectual property that you own copyright on if you are a writer, for example. On the other hand, tangible property could be anything that you own, such as vacant land, real estate properties, vehicles, or investment such as the ETF in your portfolio or the stocks that you own in your portfolio. The next question essentially comes to, are all assets created equal? My argument is definitely not. There are assets that will appreciate or hold value over time. There are assets that will depreciate over time. There are assets that will produce income over time. There are assets that will not produce income over time. So what? The important lessons to understand here is, in the long run, if the objective is to build wealth, there are two principles to essentially follow. Number one, you want to hold, appreciate assets or asset that holds value over time wherever possible. If that particular asset that appreciate or hold value will generate income on a net basis, even better. Number two, you want to limit the number of depreciating assets whenever possible. You could have an argument where certain depreciating asset you can use it to generate income. That will only make sense if you were able to produce income on a net basis. And of course, there are different ways of acquiring that particular depreciating assets too. We're going to talk more in the later episodes. Alright, let's look at this example. Person A, person B. Both of them have identical employment income and also they own their own principal residence. They each own $150,000 worth of asset in their portfolio. Here's the breakdown. Person A has a recreational vehicle of $50,000. He also has a vacant piece of land that's worth $100,000. Person B has a ETF investment portfolio that's worth $50,000. He also owns a rental property that's worth $100,000. Let's put this on a spreadsheet so we can illustrate the number better. Alright, so on this spreadsheet here, we laid out person A and person B. We included today's value of the asset for person A and also today's value for person B of the asset that he owns. And as well as 5 years later, what the asset will be. Given the growth rate of the assets, the asset will depreciate over time or appreciate over time, depending on the type of asset that it is. Let's dive right into it. Starting off with the recreational vehicle. On here, we have the rate of return. Simply means the income that it will generate. For a recreational vehicle, there is no income that will be generated, so it will be left at 0%. For the vacant land that person A also owned, there will be no rate of return, no income being generated, so we leave it again at 0. So the total income stream on a monthly basis will be $0 here. On the other hand, person B owns an ETF portfolio. Let's assume the rate of return, meaning that the dividends and the interest that is going to be paid on a regular basis, is going to be a 3% return annually, which translates to $125 on a monthly basis. The rental property that person B owns, that's worth $100,000. Let's also assume a rate of return of 3% net, meaning after all of the expenses, property tax, strata fees, whatever they might be, we still net a 3% return in this case. That translates to, on a monthly basis, $250 on a monthly recurring basis. Together, we have an income stream of $375 monthly. Immediately, if you compare to person A to person B, assuming they have identical employment income, they own their own principal residence and whatnot, it's always better to have additional income that is kind of generated on an ongoing basis to supplement the income that you already own. This type of income is essentially called passive income right here. Person A has no passive income. Person B in this case has $375 of passive income. Both of them owns the same amount of asset in this case. Let's switch gears and look at the growth of the asset on the other hand. Okay? So 5 years later, for a recreational vehicle, we all understand the fact that vehicle depreciate over time. So for simplistic purposes, I assume this is going to be a straight line depreciation, which we understand that in real life, vehicle does not depreciate on a straight line, i.e. a constant amount on an annual basis. But for simplistic purpose, we gotta assume that's the case here. I'm going to take a 15% depreciation on an annual basis. So 5 years later, the value will be dropped from $50,000 to $22,185. On the other hand, the vacant piece of land, let's assume the growth rate will be somewhat similar to the inflation target to be 2%. So the value is going to be 5 years later, $110,408. Let's do something similar for person B. Instead of a recreational vehicle, which is a depreciating asset, a ETF portfolio is an investment portfolio that this person owns. Let's just tag on a growth rate of, say, 3% on an annual basis. Under normal circumstances, investment go up, go down. It could have a negative return. But again, let's just keep things simple. Assume a 3% constant growth for the next 5 years. The asset value will increase from $50,000 to now $57,964. Rental property, let's assume a similar sort of rate of growth of 2%. So the value will be identical to the vacant land that person A actually owns, which is $110,408. Okay? If we sort of take a total between sort of the two person, you will definitely see there is going to be a difference on the amount. And a big part of it is basically contributed by the growth of the ETF investment in person B versus the depreciating value of the recreational vehicle that person A owns. Hence, it's always better to acquire appreciating asset or asset that will hold value over time versus acquiring asset that will depreciate over time wherever possible. Now I want us to look at one more thing. Okay, the growth rate of the asset definitely grow from $150,000 to $168,372 after 5 years for person B. What we haven't considered is as the value of the asset growth, the rate of your return, which is the income stream that you generate over time, should also increases as time goes on. So let's take a 3% return and a 3% return for both the investment ETF portfolio and the rental property. Now if you add them together, instead of $375 as of today, 5 years later, based on the increased value of your asset 5 years later, your passive income will also be increased from $375 to now $420.93. So hopefully the example give you a better idea and illustration of why owning a appreciating asset or asset that holds value over time is probably better financially compared to a depreciating asset, and also why a income producing asset is going to really help you over in the long run compared to a non-income producing asset. If you find this video helpful, please click that like button, share, subscribe, and also put down in the comment and let me know what other topic you potentially would like to see with regarding to personal finance. And I'll see you next time.